I am Sherry, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Sherry.
I have been through this process with 2 Big Book Step Study sponsors, a loving God. I've made all of my amends, practiced 10, 11, and 12 on a daily basis to the best of my ability or as much as my willingness will allow for any given moment, to be totally honest. It's good to be here on this Saturday morning. I love this meeting. This is like my home group to me. And thank you, Jimmy, for asking at the last minute, no less. I love Jim. I called him over this morning just to ask him if he wanted to come over for Christmas dinner, and he said, "You want to speak?" I'm like, damn it! Shouldn't have asked him that. Jim's a very good friend of mine, so I'm delighted when I'm asked. But I do apologize for those who've already heard me this week because I spoke as a pinch hitter on Wednesday night too, so apologies. So I came into when I came into AA, I was 21. So first of all, just the concept of not drinking was enough, difficult enough to wrap my head around, let alone like getting into the steps, doing work, to get better and all that. So. So as a result, I think it's fair to say that I did, the best I could at the time. I stayed sober. I did service. I did a lot of, a lot of good things in my early AA days. But one of the things that I didn't spend as much time on as I should have was kind of going through, getting through the step work. And by that, I mean, I did do step work, but I didn't do it exactly like this. But I did do step work with a sponsor. I did write 4 steps. I'd done a couple of them. I did some 5th steps, but, nothing compared to the way this particular process is laid out. So fast forward, so I'm sober and I'm sober. I get to Big Book Step Study. I had been sober 20 years. And in that 20 years, I did a lot of great things right, and I did a lot of things not right. As a result of not having these tools, there was, I permanently altered my life in terms of what my ambitions would have been in certain areas, what my future would have looked like in certain areas. And I did that because, as my friend Chris says, and I know Chris is here because I saw him somewhere. There he is. My friend Chris always talks about, we have free will. And he's not going to interrupt our free will when we are trying to flex that. And as a result, I myself, I didn't get any Hail Marys. When I was exercising my free will, I made a lot of mistakes. There was nobody coming in to save me at the 11th hour. I had to, and a lot of those mistakes, I'll live with for the rest of my life. They don't paralyze me today. I've learned a lot of lessons as a result, but but there's nothing I can do today. It's just, I didn't have the tools that I have today to deal with things, deal with life on life's term, deal with adversity, deal with even things that are unjust. I just didn't have those tools before. So as a result, I get here, I'm 20 years sober, and there's a lot of stuff in my past, and there's a lot of wreckage in my past. And the hardest part for me, starting Big Book Step Study, going through starting this process was, knowing that, because I got sober at 21, knowing that pretty much most of the damage that I caused in my life was as a sober person. That's like really hard to deal with. That I couldn't blame it on the alcohol and, all this other stuff. So it is what it is. So I get into Big Book as somebody who had a girlfriend of mine who I was really good friends with, in AA together. We traveled the circuit in AA, went on commitments, did a lot of stuff together, retreats and all that stuff. Anyways, we had a falling out, something had happened, and she had pulled away from kind of the circle, and hadn't seen her in quite a while, and then she reached out to me and asked me if she could make amends, whatever. So I go over how she makes amends to me, and as a result, we're talking about like what's kind of changed for you? What are you doing different these days? So she had said she started coming to Big Book Step Study, and so her and I started to kind of re-engage and be friendly again and do some things again, and I was like blown away at her transformation. I mean, honestly, like, this is not somebody that I ever would have thought could change. I mean, even as a sober person, I mean, again, she was a sober person like me, but she was sick, right? And until she got better through this work. So it was like I was witnessing a completely different person. She did a complete 180. And I was really intrigued by that. So she said, why don't you come to Big Book with me and check it out? So I think this was my first meeting, I believe it was either here or Whitmarsh and Leeds. I'm pretty sure it was here though. And so I said, yeah, all right. And, but again, like so at this point, right, remember I said like my first 20 years I caused a lot of damage, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't really know how sick I was at this point, because I was still looking at myself like, I'm an active AA member, I sponsor people, I give rides, I do a lot of service, I do jobs, I clean up, so I still didn't really realize how sick I still was. So I don't tell her, oh yeah, I'll come to Big Book because I'm like one of those people that comes in desperate and it's like the last house on the left, and if I don't get this, I'm going to drink again. Like I didn't have that thought process like a lot of people talk about. I just thought I'll come in and try something else because I do love AA and I do love working on myself and getting better. So I'm like, okay. So I come to my first meeting and it's on sex conduct. I have no idea what I'm going to hear. I had no problem, by the way, with not being able to talk. I was more than happy to just listen, so that was fine with me. So it's on sex conduct. I remember that because I remember I had tears in my eyes just hearing the pure honesty around that step and the humility. So anyways, but I had a great experience being here. So that began my journey in Big Book Step Study. And then I didn't and never did pull away from the other AA things I was doing with other AA meetings and stuff like that, because like I said, AA is just a part of who I am. I grew up in this program, so I didn't want to put myself in a situation where I just became really one-dimensional and I was like Big Book and nothing else, so it just kind of enhanced my program as my point. And so I got a sponsor and I did the work the way it was laid out. I first, I read the chapters, I read the pages I was told to read, I did the highlighting, the underlining, I went to my little Big Book dictionary and I would look at, what the word really means, if there was a chance that I could take it out of context or not take it the right way. And then I met with my sponsor every week. We would now reread what I just wrote, I can't even speak. We would reread what I just read during the week. That was my homework. We would reread that, and she would expand, wherever it was necessary through that chapter. So we did that for the first 3 steps, and then I took the 3rd step prayer with her. I don't even remember where I was when I took 3rd step prayer. I don't know where I was, so it wasn't some earth-shattering thing, but took the 3rd step prayer. But I do just remember that I had made a commitment that I'd bring other women through this work when I finished. So that was kind of my, freely give, freely receive type of thing. Like if I'm going to take all this in, I've got to be able to do something with it afterwards. So then we started the writing, and my sponsor was really clear. And I had been coming to Big Book for, it was probably like 2 months. I didn't come long before I decided I was going to do the work. And by the way, the tipping point for me was I just felt like, because I was coming, even though I wasn't reading or writing or doing anything. That's why I love when they say, just keep coming, right? Because it gets you. Because you're not here by accident. There's plenty of other people who need these seats. So if we've been plopped in these seats, it's because we're supposed to be here. That's just the way that's my belief anyways. So But I felt like before I decided to do the work, the more I was coming, I was just hearing things, and I thought, you know what? I have a lot of stones that have been left unturned, and I need to finish this work. You know, I need to kind of start over. And I felt like there was no more thorough process than this process. I'd done this work many other ways and did benefit from that in other ways. But there was always things that I left out. Or there wasn't a full completion in terms of getting the work over the goal line. Or the work stopped after my 5th, and we never did anything more after that. It was like there was no steps beyond step 5. So I just felt like I want to do this. And I felt like here it is. It's right out of the big book. So I'm not doing some other 12-step process that, you know, this was developed by AA. You know, I had worked with people who had done the Eddie O's 12-step and other things like that. I felt like there's no arguing the fact that this was developed from AA. So I'm like, I'm going to do it this way. So I made that decision. I got the sponsor. So my sponsor says, before we started the 4th, she said, so here's my expectations. You're going to write every day. There are no vacations. We're gonna meet once a week, and I'm gonna review your notebook. So basically, like, she's gonna know whether I'm writing every day, right? And there were a few other things. She said, you're gonna go to at least 2 meetings, at least 2 big book step study meetings. I don't care what you do with other AA and whatever, but 2 big book step study meetings. And I did kind of balk at that at first. I was like, oh, you know, I'm doing it, whatever. So, but I'm like, I got to do it. Like, obviously, I have 20 years of sober garbage behind me. Like, I got to do something different. Okay. So then she says, oh, here's the other thing she said. This was probably the hardest thing for me. She said, oh, well, you know, I think that the other women that you're sponsoring, because I'm sponsoring a few women from my, you know, general AA program, I'll call it, right? She said, I think you should probably let them go, and you probably should ask them to find somebody else that they can work with. And I'm like, and some of these girls, like literally, like, they'd been in my life for years. They were like sisters, you know? And I had a problem with that. I was like, and I'm like, you know, she's like, Sherry, I'm like, well, you know, why do I have to let them go? But she's like, because you don't have anything to offer. And I'm like, I didn't like that either. I was like, I don't have anything to offer. I'm like, well, you know, like, I'm like, but, you know, we pick each other up for meetings. We do. She's like, yeah, you can do all that. But, you know, you're embarking on a new journey to get better and to go through this work. And, you know, in fairness to them, I think you know, you're going to be really distracted right now because you're going to be doing this work. And I think you're not going to be as, you know, available to them. And you just, you know, the bottom line is, it wasn't even really ego. I like felt bad. I was like, you know, I'm going to have to tell these women that I've been with for many years, you know, that they need to, like, go on and find this. It was almost like I felt bad, like they weren't, I don't know. I know it sounds like it's ego, but that's truly not where it was coming from at that time. I just kind of felt like I was leaving them in a lurch. I don't know. I can't explain it. So that was hard for me to do that. And I did try to wiggle my way through that a little bit. I was like, well, what if I let go of this person, but not this person? And she's like, yeah, that's not going to work. So ultimately, I did. I did it with a lot of prayer and help, but I did, and it worked out fine. So obviously, right, because obviously it worked out fine, because it's not about me. So anyways, so I started my writing, and I did it exactly the way she asked me to do it, you know, because that was the only way she was going to work with me, right? She wasn't going to have this fly-by-night, you know, are you writing? She wasn't going to be chasing me. She didn't want any part of that. And I know what that's like being a sponsor on the other side. Like, I don't like having to do that. So I'm like, I'm going to do this the right way. So I did. I wrote every single day. I wrote an hour every day. I had, 3 notebooks, and I got through all my writing, and it was, I think, just short of 4 months. And I literally started this work, I think it was the month after I got my 20-year coin. So here I am, 20 years, starting the work. I'm starting all over again. And I have to say that the work, I know this sounds kind of messed up, but I actually enjoyed doing the work. I was blown away by how much I was learning just by writing. The turnarounds, the whole thing, I was blown away by it. I'm not generally somebody that plays the victim role in any way, so I didn't have any problem writing the resentments and being clear about where the truth was. That all made sense to me. It was rational. So that's probably why I had no problem writing every day. And I had just as busy of a life as everybody else, But I also knew that every Saturday, I would see my sponsor here, and I would also see her on Wednesday nights over at Whitmarsh and Leeds. And I knew one way or another every week I had to give her my notebook. So I knew I had to get the work done. And my sponsor is somebody who is a very, very, very serious big book step study person. She's fun, she's all that too, but this is very serious work to her. This is like life or death to her. So she wasn't going to be anybody that I was going to be able to pull anything over on. She wasn't going to accept any excuses if I showed up on Saturday with my notebook and she hadn't seen it in a week and there was 3 pages written, right? Unless something legitimately really came up, and I would talk to her during the week about that and tell her that was different. So I wrote every day. I wrote for an hour. I usually wrote 2 hours on the weekends, and it was because I just wanted to do this work right, and I wanted to do the way it was laid out. And I had said this the other night too. I had even got to the point that I was at the end of the writing. It was on sex conduct. I think I just started sex conduct, so I'm pretty much at the end of the writing there in terms of that stuff. And I went on a vacation with my girlfriends, who were all sober. Went on vacation with my girlfriends, and the big joke was, because I brought my notebook and I finished my sex conduct at the pool. That was the big joke. Every time they looked over, I was writing. They're all at the pool, this woman, they're having a good time, whatever. And I'm no, I got to get this done. I wrote on the plane on the way down. I wrote on the plane on the way back. And by the time I landed back in Massachusetts, my sex conduct was done. But to me, it was just that important. I am one of those people that would enjoy taking the easier, softer way when there is one, there's no doubt. But I wanted to get this work done, because you got to remember, so now by the time I get, especially to that point, right, I've gone through all the resentments, I've gone through all the fears. I'm almost beside myself at this point, where how messed up I really am. I'm oh my God, I gotta finish this work, So, because it was just so enlightening the whole way through. Those turnarounds, it's unbelievable. And then the fear turnarounds, and it just, all this work, it's yeah, so I couldn't wait to get started on the 5th step. So then it was time to kind of make arrangements with my sponsor, how we're going to do this 5th step thing. So remember, right, so I've done this, not this work, but I've done AA step work in the past. I've done 4th steps. I've done 5th steps, right? So I still think here, which it kind of blows my mind. I've been writing for 4 months, but all of a sudden I think I'm driving the bus, right? So I say to my sponsor, okay, why don't I just take the day off from work? I said, I'll come over with coffee and we'll just bang it out. That's exactly what I said to her, just like that. Because I'm big deal, we'll get it done in 6-7 hours. What's the big deal, right? So, and she's she just looked at me like she was shell-shocked. She's yeah, so that's not really going to work for me. And I'm thinking, my first thought was, but this isn't about you, this is about me. That's my first thought. Right? Thank God I don't always say what's going on in the bubble over my head. So I'm like, okay. So I'm like, do we want to, because remember, I've never been through this work, so I kind of didn't really know what was going to happen. So I said, well, so do you want to split it up like over a weekend? Like, I'll come up like Friday, and then Saturday, and then Sunday? Like, she's like, no. She's like, because remember, like, a part of me legitimately really just wants to get through the work. Like, and I only knew this other way from previous AA ways. So she's like, no, why don't we do this? Why don't I come to your house and for 2 hours once a week, and we'll do it that way. And of course, all of a sudden, like, I'm calculating in my head, 2 hours a week, how many weeks is this going to be? Like, brings me out to Christmas. Like, I'm like thinking like, and I'm like, ugh. So I said, okay, that's what we'll do. And at first I'm like, oh, really? Like I work an hour away, I get home, it's gonna be on a Tuesday night. Like, I'm like, I kind of wasn't up for this, but I'm like, okay, we're gonna do it her way. So she came over, and that's how we proceeded. It was like, I think it took us like 8 weeks. And she came in, she comes into my house, sits in my living room, and, there was no dilly-dally, and there isn't, so how was your week? And, I'm thinking we're going to kind of like ease into this every week, and it's like, okay, let's bring God into the room, let's pray, and then you start, and you just read. There isn't going to be this back and forth, and right? Because remember, by now, it's kind of like, it's not really intimidating, because she's already seen the entire notebook, right? So I'm like, okay, which, by the way, I will say it was really good that she had already seen the entire notebook, because I am one of those people who's done fifth steps before, where as I'm reading to my sponsor, I'm flipping like, because I'm sitting in a way where she really can't see what's going on. I did this once with another sponsor, and I'm sitting in the living room like this, and she's like over there, and now she, in the other AA way, like, they don't read your notebook, right? So she doesn't know what's in here, and every time it would be time to flip a page, I'd flip like 3. So I'm like, so it's a good thing, like, she had actually had to read my notebook every single week. Like, so by the time I get to this fifth step, it is not intimidating at all. She's already seen it all. And believe me, she would mark and make notes on it, so she was really reading it when she was checking it. So anyways, so she comes over, we invite God in, and I just read for 2 hours. There isn't any of this back and forth. She's not falling asleep. I'm not falling asleep. There's no other distractions. It's just her and I, and we're reading. There's no candles going. There's no patchouli going. There's none of that. It's just her and I facing each other, and I'm sitting there reading my book. So, the first week, it was actually more emotional than I thought it was going to be. It was kind of strange, because I kept thinking, she's already seen this all. But it was more emotional. I found myself, I was a little choked up. This is in the first week. So we get to the end, and she's like, okay, so same time next week. And I'm looking at my notebook. I'm like, oh my God, we've only gotten through like, I don't know how many pages. I'm like, I'm like calculating now in my head. I'm like, because I was actually, now I'm at the point that I want to ask her, does she want to do like 4 hours once a week? 4 hours on Tuesday nights, 6 to 10, not 6 to 8, right? Because I'm like, based on how long this took me tonight, like, this is going to take me, again, it's going to be, Flag Day by the time we're done, and it's only like November right now, right? So I'm like, she's like, no, let's just let God, God will take care of it. So that's how it went. So we did that 8 weeks, and it was actually, it was an awesome experience going through it that way. And what I realized too was, man, it's like really tiring, talking for like 2 hours straight, especially talking about stuff like this, stuff that's not really easy to talk about, right? Maybe just because you're feeling a lot of the feelings that you have around whatever these circumstances are, and it's still emotional. Even if you're kind of healed from them, it's still emotional to talk about. So I was grateful at that point that I just took the suggestions, didn't fight her, and I just did it that way. I was grateful for the 2 hours, because by the time the 2 hours were done every night, it was I was exhausted. And by the way, just to fast forward real quickly for a second, being on the other side of that now, having sat through many fifth steps with people that I've brought through the work, it's just as exhausting for the sponsor. So now I'm like, now I get it when she said, that's not really going to work for me. And I'm like, yeah, now I get it. I really get it. So I got through the work. I got through that fifth step, and it wasn't like anything earth-shattering happened. That last week that I was reading it, nothing happened. I did get the instruction to go home, sit for an hour, and nothing else came up. But I just felt good that even though I still had these other steps to go, right? Because there's still, 7 more behind this. But I just felt good that this was a lot of work. It took a lot of time. It took an awful lot of humility. It took a lot of honesty. And that's, I'm getting emotional again. Wednesday night, I freaking lost it and started bawling while I was up here sharing. So I'm not going to do that this time. But it took a lot of, it just took a lot of honesty, to get through that. And I felt good that I turned every stone and I turned every page when I was reading it. So I really, really felt like I did this work the way it was laid out. And, and then I went on and I continued and do still continue to work the other steps. And it was funny because when I did get to the point where I could even speak in the meetings, I didn't want to. It's like the funniest thing how that happens. I'm like, I'm not going to sound as good as the other people, and you're just all over the place. It's just funny how this process really changes you. And I feel like for the first time, they say when you come into AA, part of the work is we want to change the person that we brought into the halls, right? So, and I feel like this was the first time after doing this work that I could say, wow, I'm really starting to change that person I brought into the halls. And even today, I'm still not like the person that I want to be, but I'm very grateful now that I'm not the person that I was, and that I at least have the tools now when I do trip up and things happen, I have a way to correct those things, because things are still going to happen. So I don't know. It's really good to be here, and I just want to thank Jimmy for asking me, and it's a big meeting, so I'm going to turn it over. Thank you.